sending out a comment, especially to a manager or to an exec, and you don't get any feedback, or you get kind of blank stares, or you keep repeating yourself and you feel like you're getting red in the face. Why don't people understand what I'm trying to say and why this is so important? And I think my aim here is to give you a couple of frameworks from my side that I found useful to actually have better outcomes and better communication. Okay, so the goal is basically to give you a flight of frameworks to become a better operator. And you'll see that I'm going to keep repeating that you need to put in the reps, which means practice makes perfect in my book. And it's also something that's very essential to do with everyone across the board, not just your execs or not just your manager. And then to focus on the outcome. And here, what I really mean is that sometimes you're looking at it from your point of view and you're saying, this is the ideal outcome for me. I want my recommendation to be agreed to, or I want this project to go through, or I want this person to be hired, etc. But sometimes that may not be the best for the business. That doesn't mean we don't do the work to put in the best case and to make the best case and to share our recommendation and our point of view, but it doesn't necessarily mean a unanimous yes for everything that you're going to put out there into the world. It actually just means what's the best outcome for the business, and have we thought this through really comprehensively? Okay, so we're gonna jump right in. Okay, just to start, if people can put in the chat, right? What percentage of professionals do you think feel that their workplace communication is strong? People are allowed to add to the chat, right?
Correct, Vibhashini, they are allowed to.
Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna quickly check the chat. Yeah, so we're seeing some under 10%, 30%. Some people think they're very optimistic. You guys are much more optimistic than I am. 90%, 100% of communication is really strong. I want to work where you are working because I have not seen that. So actually, Suzette is very close. According to a recent study, the amount of leaders who think that their workplace communication is strong is actually 14%, 1-4. So that's very tiny if you think about it. And it goes to hopefully a couple of frameworks here, which we're gonna up our contribution to communication, that it's not as bad as 14%. So we're upping that within our organizations. So this first concept is something, it's all of this is learned and borrowed from other people as well. So you'll see a couple of I'll share the slides afterwards with Michelle so you guys can get it. But there's a lady called Wes Kao. There's also Seth Godin. There's quite a few people who talk about upping your communication game. And I've learned these frameworks from them. So these are not my own frameworks. These are things that I have learned over the years and I found very useful. So this RLC framework, it is basically how do you be more recipient focused? So one of the things we do often when we're communicating is we frame it based on us. We frame it on our point of view, our what we want out of it. We selfishly look at our outcomes, right? So it's very me focused often. And actually, a framework here is trying to say you should frame a lot of it around your recipient. You should frame most of what you're saying around the other person. Why would they care to agree with what you're saying? What would make them actually say yes, right? So the idea here is to address what your audience cares about, not what you care about. Sure, yours should be in the mix there, but more focused on how this would benefit your audience is actually the win for you. It's how communication would get a bit easier. Then the second thing is to share your logic. So often we will just say, we kind of need to do this thing. But we don't give them an idea of what was our thought process behind why we're saying we want to do this thing. What's the upside of doing this thing? What's the risks that are of not doing this thing or of doing this thing that we've considered? So we kind of show that we've really thought about it holistically, right? What evidence or data did we use to come up with this recommendation? Sharing your logic gets you a long way to getting your recipient to say yes, to buy into what you're saying, to also build on what you're saying. So there's a lot of good benefits that come from sharing your thought process. And then reducing cognitive load. A whole bunch of us are actually, we're task switching and context switching all the time. So I know from an exec perspective, you do it all the time. So you're now coming out of a meeting and you have to reframe for another meeting, which wasn't on your mind for the whole week, and you have to kind of reset. Our job as the communicator of information should be, as far as possible, to reduce the cognitive load for our recipient, right? So help them understand what we're saying. Don't let them guess what we're saying or guess at our meaning. Some of the things here is also like using complete sentences, reiterating what an acronym means. So being clear about what you need. Lots of people will say FYI, right? FYI is okay, but even better is if you're sending it to the person for a reason. You could say, I'm sharing this with you because there's a delay on project X. There's no need for you to action anything, and I'm monitoring the situation, but it's just a heads up, here's what's happening, so that the person, your exec, knows what's going on, right? Don't drop them into a thread which is already 10 messages deep and then say, what's your thoughts? Rather summarize things for them and then say, like, here's the context of everything below, here's where we're sitting at currently, and here's what we've tried, and we'd really love your thoughts if there's anything we've left off the list of things we need to try. There's a whole bunch of things you could do to reduce the cognitive load, but dropping somebody 10 threads in or attaching 5 different emails that they need to read to kind of get a context, that's very taxing on your recipient. Being someone who's had that and experienced that before, it also makes it seem as though the other person on the who's doing the communication really doesn't care about my time, thinks that my time is meaningless and I must just sit here and troll through mails to try and figure out where they're at and how can I add to this conversation or give my assistance. That's really not the kind of way you want to come across to your execs. Okay, so I want to just talk about this recipient focused, and this is something that I do every time that I send out a mail. It used to take longer, but now it takes me quick to just squeeze through and see how am I structuring things, right? So you can just have a quick squeeze at this message, but basically it's somebody who wants to visit. It's a made up message to illustrate the point. This person wants to visit the university's art department and wants to present to the faculty. But it's mainly about how it's going to benefit their students. It's very me focused. Even we're hoping we could come through on a Tuesday afternoon after 12 p.m. And ideally, these are the dates that would suit us. They do say we're happy to accommodate your schedule and any guidelines you may have, but it's kind of very me focused, right? It's very much all about what I'm going to get from it rather than what's in it for the university. Why should the university entertain these people coming through, right? So one of the things you could do is quickly squeeze your communications before you're sending it out and just check how much of it is recipient focus versus me focus. So if you had to highlight how much of it is for a benefit of me or my organization versus or my team versus the recipient, you can quickly get a glimpse that actually pretty much 90% of this mail is all about me. So recipient focus is actually switching it. What's in it for the university? Like, what are they going to get out of this so that they also benefit, right? Because we're kind of asking them for a favor here, and we haven't given them anything that's to their benefit. So here's a little rewrite of that, which is more recipient focused. And here it's like, now I'm reaching out with an idea that I would think would be benefit the university while also offering our students a wonderful learning experience. So at this high school, now it says it's a school for the deaf. Our drama students are busy with this performance. We think the university's art faculty is a great fit for this. But it goes on to say, look, we've seen that the university is on a drive to attract students from diverse backgrounds, and this would give you a great opportunity as well as our students. So I think this is a much better framing of, you're going to benefit as well. It's not all just our students that are going to benefit or our program that's going to benefit. You're also going to get something out of this. Okay, then I love a good acronym. I don't know who else loves a good acronym, but I think it's a good way to remember things. And this acronym, BLUFF, is bottom line upfront. Or this lady, Wes Kao, so you'll see there's a link here. She says, start right before you get eaten by the bear. In other words, sometimes if you're going to camping, you don't talk about how you got on the road and it was a lot of traffic and you eventually got to the destination and you were very excited to pull out your new tent, and that's nobody cares. But if you talk about how somebody had left a pack of biltong outside and you guys nearly got mauled by a bear because this person had left that out, that's a much better way to start your context and your story for your audience, right? So in this world, it's your main point and your context below. So the main point could be the latest status. Could be for this project, it is delayed by X amount of weeks, and then telling the person the context below. What this offers your recipient is that they have agency. They can now, it's in their control to ignore the context if they're already aware of it, or to read through the context if they need a full debrief of what was going on, or to also squiz it if they were involved, but maybe they fell off 2 weeks ago and they're not involved in this project anymore, but they just want to have a quick squiz of what was happening in the last couple of weeks that they weren't involved. This is a beautiful way to give your audience or your recipient agency on what to consume. Like, do they, if they already know from the main point, they get it, they're like, cool, I don't need to read further, I'm in agreement with the recommendation and with the latest status, I know what's happening, I know you're on top of it, cool, we can move on. Or if they're a bit hesitant or skeptical, they can read further and they get to at least alleviate that skepticism. So bottom line up front, it's a really nice acronym to remember, and I use it all the time. And here's the other thing about putting in the reps. You must practice with everyone. So this doesn't mean these kind of communications or this way of communication is only for your execs, is only for your manager. It should be actually for anyone, whether it is your teammates, so laterally, whether it's your direct reports, whether it is your manager, whether it's an exec, whether it's the board. It's this kind of framing helps no matter what. And if you put in the reps for everyone that you communicate with in such a fashion, especially for long form kind of communications where there's some complexities involved and a lot of nuance and a lot of things are happening, you want to use a framework like this. I found that it's very valuable across the board. I use it with everyone. Okay. Okay, then there's another example of something that is before and then after to illustrate what I'm talking about. So this one's giving a project update, and you can see they start with, as you know, back in October, we started this project, then the API changed. We've been looking at the query latency, but it doesn't show any improvement. We've had other issues which have also set us back further. Since we're behind, I think maybe there's a session needed with IT, or we need to ask John for an extension, right? There's some positives in there, which is the uplift in sales, but then it's saying it's a very complicated situation and kind of what do you think? So in this example, it kind of gives like you're dumping everything on your recipient. Your recipient has to sift through this, try and figure out what's the main problem, where are we at, and they have no idea of your thinking. They have no idea of what's your recommendation, you who's closer to the project. What are you thinking? Like, what's your point of view? They have none of that context in here, and they kind of have to do a whole bunch of heavy lifting in this communication. And here's a rewrite of that, right? So here up front, you can see the recommendation is to ask for an extension on this project. And then the bottom line is basically, we're behind on Project Alpha, and here's what I recommend. I'm recommending asking John for a 3-week extension. And already I've gone ahead and revised the timeline, and I'm going to proceed with the ask unless you have any objections by the end of today, right? And then there's the context below as to why you're saying this. So here, again, sharing a bit of your logic. Launching now would lead to poor customer experience and a drop off on the site. The potential lift in the sales could be diluted because of the bad outcomes, right? The infrastructure will be upgraded to address the latency issues that we've been experiencing, and it actually caters for more users. This is a much better communication for your recipient to understand what's your point of view, what do you think we should do, and what's the context of how we got here, what can we do, what's the options on the table. So I always think you should share your point of view, share your recommendation, because we're often the ones closer to the project, the person who's writing the communication. So you kind of, from your experience, from what you've gone through, what you've seen on this project, you know what your recommendation would be, whether it would be to delay it, to stop it, to change directions, to add something and launch later. You're the closest to actually stating, and your point of view matters. I know from my perspective, when my team adds their recommendation or their point of view, it really shows rigorous thinking on their side. I really appreciate it because it's not a heavy lifting on my side. I can see why do you say this? What was your thought process in coming up with this recommendation? And I'm more likely to fall in line with their recommendation because they're closer to it. Okay, then there's another acronym. You can see I love acronyms. It's the question behind the question. So often you'll be like, as I said, lots of times you will have blank looks around the table, or you'll be repeating yourself until you're really red in the face, trying to get your team to understand why this is so important for you and why are you saying this, but you just see more skepticism or more questions or questions repeated. They keep asking you the same thing. They'll ask you this today, and maybe a week later, they still ask you the same question. So often that's like a deeper worry or a concern, or they don't even know how to articulate it. So often when an exec is asking you, like, how's this project going? And then they ask you a week later, even though they asked you and you gave them feedback, you've probably not given them the feedback that is leaving them comfortable to know you've got it covered. You totally have handled this. There's no reason for them to feel really that they need to step in. They don't need to feel that it's going to hit the ceiling and they're going to be the ones liable for your bad planning or your bad management of this project, right? So some signs of the question behind the question is you keep repeating yourself, your asker is like really skeptical, there's a lot of follow-up questions, there's a lot of inquiries that seem irrelevant or like you've already talked about this, right? So it's also knowing that your exec or your VP or CEO is not asking this, is not being coy. They often don't know what's their feeling or why they keep asking this. They're not being intentionally like trying to put you on the spot. It's actually kind of subconscious, this concern of theirs, right? So as we said, like an example would be, how's this project going, right? It's often, is it really being handled or am I going to have to clean up a mess? So some of the, like a good example would be, to give them comfort that you've got everything under control is like, no, I've checked the numbers yesterday. Everything's tracking as expected. I'm monitoring progress a couple of times a week and I'll flag anything if it changes, right? Sometimes it's very difficult to figure out what's the question behind the question. As in, you don't even know when they keep asking you, how's this project going? It's often hard to know what's exactly their concern. Like, it's nicer if you can try and think about what the question behind the question is, but sometimes you don't know. And then you just need to probe. You could say, great question. Could you share a bit of context on what's top of mind so I know what to share that's relevant, right? Some of the things that I use to try and figure out the question behind the question is who's asking this of me? Like if it's the head of product, given their role, why would they be asking me this question? What's risky about this project for them? What would they need to see? Do they need to see numbers? Do they need to see user feedback? Do they need to see survey data? Something to give them comfort that we're on the right track. We've got it. We're taking care of it. They don't need to stress about it, right? Also, if there's anything that came up recently, like a recent event or a deadline that maybe they're worried that we're not going to make the deadline, or they haven't heard feedback from us in the last week, so they're concerned we're going to be asking for an extension at the last minute. Okay, and then just to reiterate, all of this doesn't necessarily only happen with upper management or execs. You can put in the reps with everyone. You can try and probe the question behind the question with your manager, obviously, but this communication of recipient focused and sharing your logic can happen with your team. I find that it makes for better communication experts coming up through the ranks as well. Not that I'm any expert, I am also putting in the reps. Every day I put in the reps. I wanted to showcase one other thing, which is for verbal communication. So this one is, it's not a, so we've been talking a lot about written communication, and I really truly believe we can help make communication better across our organization if we take just a few minutes extra being prepared, thinking about these frameworks, thinking about the question behind the question. And I found it is very valuable once I started using these frameworks myself, right? But there's another one which I'm not comfortable with speaking in public. I haven't been since I was a child, but as I go up the ranks in my career, it's more and more expected of me. It's more and more also asked of me to share things that have worked for me in my career, like I'm doing for you guys. So that for me has been a deliberate shift. I need to shift to be able to be comfortable to do that, right? So I've worked on my speaking for probably the last couple of years now. This is a site. It's almost like Toastmasters, but it's online. It's an online platform. And what I really love about them is that they actually have games that you can play that is for better communication, right? And I'm going to showcase it to you guys in just a moment. I just want to quickly finish. It's almost at the end now. Yes, so this is just the last slide about the key takeaways, right? So my key takeaways is this recipient focused, logic sharing, reduced cognitive load framework. I I have found that it is a beautiful way to show that you care about your recipient. It's a beautiful way to also have very much better communication within your organization, across your teams, with your cross-functional partners, with your teammates. It's helped me a hell of a lot. Then these other two frameworks, which kind of they fit into that. They're supporting frameworks for being recipient focused, is the bottom line up front and then the context below, and addressing this question behind the question. It also really shows your rigorous thinking and your care if you do things like this. And then again, always putting in the reps to practice with everyone. Okay, that's the presentation. I'm just going to show you the Ultra Speaking app. Just let me know if you can see this, please. Michelle, somebody, is it visible to you guys? The
It's perfect.
Ultra Speaking.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Awesome.
perfect.
Okay, so I'm going to do a live rep, guys. So bear with me. This is it's usually very nerve-wracking, but these are games. So I'll show you the platform. So this is the platform. And then you can sign up for free. You won't get all of the games that they have available. There's quite a few that you can play and get better at your verbal communication. I find it really helpful to find a buddy. So I play it sometimes with my best buddy. I also play it with my kid. I think it's a very important skill for children. So I play it with my child. Yeah, so it's a really nice one. Sometimes you can play with your team, so we all get better at communication together. So I'm going to play this game, Triple Step, um, to just illustrate for you what it is like. I'm going to say 5 topics, and I'm going to give it a minute. Okay, and then there's different word sets here that you can pick. Um, let's pick a business one because we're trying to do a business communication one. Okay. So for me, I think strengthening team collaboration has to be very intentional. I think we get so caught up in the day to day in our corporations and organizations that we don't really step back and take a beat. You know, it's like we just put on our business attire and we come to work and we're just driven. But team collaboration really needs to be well thought of. We have to have team building to make sure that the camaraderie is there. It's really a partnership between you and your direct reports. They need to feel that they're in a safe environment, that they can collaborate with each other. And this cannot be outsourced to a virtual assistant. This needs you to think about it and sit down and be very intentional. So that's a glimpse of this little communication platform that just allows you to like impromptu speeches and get better at your verbal communication. Yeah, and that's it from me.
Thank you, Vibhashini. I think we're left with just 4 minutes. I'm going to ask my colleague Grady to just go through the chat if there are 2 or 3 that we can. But while she's doing it, thank you for this presentation. Definitely communicated in the most practical and learning curve. So it's a lot of takeaways and a lot for us to practice on our own. Thank you so much. And I think myself personally, it's a good learning tool. Thank you very much. Grady, over to you. If there's any questions on the chat. I'm not seeing any. I'm not sure if Grady is muted, but I'm just getting on the chat is to all the participants that have been just representing themselves and then just giving you a lot of positive feedback, Vibhashini. I think all the emojis and the positive comments. And I'm just going to check if there's any Shemaine. You can unmute yourself. I see your hand raised, and I've seen it's been raised for most part of the session. Do you have a question or comment? Hey, if there's no questions,
can you hear me?
Yes, we can now.
The question. Hi, everybody. Quickly, I'm over 50 now, and my company, I find the use of AI as a technological gap and age gap assistant tool. So I would like to ask you if you support AI. Second to that, if given the terms and conditions that we can't share the links of the session and everything, and those that are partnering with us are younger, can't we, the PURCO or PUTCO, make exceptions that companies that has got more than one director can also invite in such informative sessions are younger partners? It would be also in a developmental way to assist those that are partnering with us to assist our businesses to grow. I thank you so much. What an informative session. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
A pleasure, Charmaine. I think if I got your first question, you broke up a bit, but you're asking about how can we leverage AI to kind of help us with communication? Do I have the gist of it?
Yes, yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'll let Michelle or Grady take the other question, but from that perspective, you definitely can. So I like using it for after I've done my thinking. So I will put it together a first draft myself, right? And then using these frameworks, I will sometimes put it into an AI chatbot like ChatGPT or something. And then I'd say, tell me how I can make this more recipient focused, or following these frameworks help me restructure this, right? But then I will again take what came out from the AI and make it myself, my own, because I don't want my voice to get lost in the wash. It's something that's very precious to me, that I want to keep the communication as I communicate really mine. And I find that the AI is very, it's like, it's having like talking to the same person. It's like talking to a whole bunch of people who are just the same. And I don't want to be that, and I don't want my recipient to have to deal with that. So definitely use it, leverage it, but always put your own voice on top of it. And then Michelle and Grady can take your second question, but I don't know if anyone else has a question regarding the session.
So if I may, in the interest of time, I think if there's any questions, we would gladly, if you can email it to Grady, but Grady will also post her details, and we will also consolidate, we'll go through the chats, and we will definitely, so we will be sharing the presentations as well as the recording to all those who have attended. And thank you once again, Vibhashni. It's been really informative. We're just going to take the last minute in terms of thanking our participants for attending. We normally do kind of a thank you for the attendance. So I'm going to hand over to Grady.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and thank you, Vibhashni, for the insightful presentation. We're now moving on to the final item for today, which is the draw for an Amazon voucher. Vibhashni, may I kindly ask you to choose a number between 1 and 300?
275.
275. All right, then I have some of our participants, most of them today, and the lucky number 275, you said, is Andrea Canal. So Andrea, congratulations. You've won yourself an Amazon voucher, courtesy of PURCO SA. We will be in contact with you shortly regarding your prize. And this brings us now to the end of our webinar this morning. On behalf of PURCO SA, I would like to sincerely thank our members, suppliers, stakeholders, our speaker, Vibhashni, colleagues, and all guests who join us today for another PURCO SA session. We truly appreciate your participation, and we look forward to seeing you again at our next session. Until then, thank you once again for joining us, and have a lovely day.